Many people believe that as long as they are in a calorie deficit, fat loss should continue, and if progress stops, the immediate conclusion is that something must be wrong with their metabolism or that their body has stopped responding completely. However, in most cases, fat loss does not stop because the body is broken, and it is not because the laws of energy balance have stopped working, but rather because what people think is a calorie deficit is no longer actually a deficit. This is one of the most misunderstood aspects of fat loss, because the idea of a calorie deficit seems simple, but in practice, it is constantly changing based on multiple factors that are easy to overlook. When you first begin a diet, creating a calorie deficit is relatively straightforward because your body weight is higher, your daily movement is usually normal, and your metabolism has not yet adapted to the lower calorie intake, which allows fat loss to occur at a predictable rate. Over time, however, several changes begin to happen simultaneously, and each of these changes gradually reduces the size of that deficit, even if your eating habits appear to stay the same. One of the most important factors is the change in total daily energy expenditure, which includes everything from your resting metabolism to your daily movement and exercise, and this number is not fixed because it adjusts based on your body weight and behavior. As you lose weight, your body requires fewer calories to maintain itself, which means that the same amount of food that once created a deficit may slowly become closer to maintenance, even if nothing about your diet appears to have changed. At the same time, your body becomes more efficient at using energy, a process often referred to as metabolic adaptation, where basic physiological functions begin to require slightly less energy than before, and although this change is subtle, it contributes to a gradual reduction in calorie expenditure. Another major factor that often goes unnoticed is a reduction in daily movement, which is sometimes called non-exercise activity, and this includes all the small movements that happen throughout the day, such as walking, standing, changing posture, and general physical activity that is not structured exercise. During long periods of dieting, people often experience lower energy levels, and without realizing it, they begin to move less, spending more time sitting, avoiding unnecessary movement, and generally becoming more sedentary. These changes may seem insignificant, but they can reduce daily calorie expenditure by a substantial amount, sometimes enough to completely eliminate the deficit that was previously driving fat loss. Exercise itself can also become more efficient over time because as you repeat the same workouts, your body improves coordination and technique, which means that the same session may require less energy than it did when you first started. While this adaptation is beneficial for performance, it also contributes to a reduction in total energy expenditure, which further narrows the gap between calorie intake and calorie output. Another important factor is consistency, because maintaining a strict calorie deficit over time is challenging. And even when people believe they are being consistent, small deviations often occur. Portion sizes may gradually increase, small snacks may go untracked, and calorie-dense ingredients like oils and sauces may not be measured as carefully as they were in the beginning. These small inconsistencies may only add up to a few hundred calories per day, but that is often enough to eliminate a deficit entirely, especially after other adaptations have already reduced energy expenditure. This is why many people find themselves in a situation where they believe they are in a calorie deficit, but in reality, they are eating at maintenance without realizing it. At this point, frustration builds, because from their perspective, they are doing everything correctly, but the expected results are not happening. The common reaction is to reduce calorie intake even further, but when intake is already low, this approach can lead to increased fatigue, reduced daily movement, and even stronger metabolic adaptations, which can make fat loss more difficult rather than easier. Instead of immediately cutting calories, a more effective approach is to reassess the situation and identify which factors have changed, and then make targeted adjustments that restore a true calorie deficit in a sustainable way. One of the simplest strategies is to increase daily movement, not necessarily through intense exercise, but by adding more low-intensity activity throughout the day, such as walking more frequently, standing instead of sitting when possible, and reducing long periods of inactivity. These changes can significantly increase daily energy expenditure without adding excessive stress or fatigue, making them a more sustainable option compared to further calorie restriction. Another effective strategy is to improve tracking accuracy by returning to more precise portion measurements, being mindful of hidden calories, and re-establishing consistent habits that were present at the beginning of the diet. In many cases, simply restoring consistency and increasing awareness is enough to reintroduce a calorie deficit and restart fat loss. In some situations, especially after long periods of dieting, taking a short break from the calorie deficit can also be beneficial, as it allows the body to recover from prolonged restriction and helps restore energy levels and adherence. This approach is often referred to as a diet break, and while it may seem counterintuitive, it can make the overall fat loss process more effective by improving long-term sustainability. The most important idea to understand is that fat loss does not stop because your body is broken, and it does not require extreme measures to restart. But rather, it requires an understanding of how your body adapts over time and how small changes can significantly impact the overall outcome. Fat loss is not a fixed equation, and it is not something that responds only to effort, but rather something that responds to the conditions you create, which means that when those conditions change, your results will change as well. The people who succeed in the long term are not the ones who push themselves to the limit at all times, but the ones who are able to recognize when adjustments are needed and make those changes in a consistent and sustainable way. If you're interested in learning more about how metabolism affects fat loss, you can find additional resources in the description below.